My Inner Knowing, empowering you to find your compass for the journey. We are dedicated to supporting you to rediscover and trust your natural ability to navigate life each day by sharing insight and experience through the lens of two professional communicators and their guests. We intend to prompt internal inquiry that supports all those willing to explore a unique path.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, Angie?
I feel pretty good. It's been a roller coaster ride lately in a good way. And I'm here to talk about my inner knowing.
Yes. Yay. Yeah. So when you think about that at this point in your life, what does it mean to you?
We were talking about that this morning while I was having coffee. And I think for me, that's changed over the past few years. I think that up until recently, I didn't really even think about inner knowing.
Yeah.
And I can remember being younger, being a kid, and intuitively, innately recognizing that I had inner knowing. It was just there. It wasn't something I thought about or processed. It just was. And then at some point along the way, I separated from that for a long time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started the process, probably, 5 years ago, of getting into therapy and really starting to do work.
Yeah.
That started to come back. Yeah, that was a gradual process. And over the past maybe, 18 months or so, I've been actively thinking about and pursuing inner knowing. And now it feels like that's coming back to me.
Yeah. How do you, when you say that, you feel like it's coming back to you? What is it that you notice?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is I've been thinking about where I feel something in my body, which I had totally disconnected from.
Sure.
For a long time. But something that's maybe a little bit more concrete. I've noticed that when I am thinking about something, so maybe making a decision about an action or something that I want to do, when it's right, I feel really clear in that. So no resistance, a clarity. And I just know that whatever this decision is, for instance, moving. So we have, years ago, we were still living in Iowa, and I am from the Kansas City area. And I had graduated I was done with grad school, looking for a job. And one day my wife and I were out driving around, and we just said, wow, why are we staying in Iowa? Our entire family, our families are in Missouri. And in that moment, it was so clear that this was the action that was right. There wasn't any resistance. We didn't think about any of the barriers, the challenges to that, the logistics, the things that I would normally immediately start thinking about, 'cause I'm always getting into the practical aspects and the logistics of a decision. None of that factored in. It was just the feeling that, oh, right. This is right. I think for me that is a type of inner knowing. I can tell when my brain, my planning mind starts to get in the way, and we need to be able to plan. We need logistics. We need all of those things. We need that. But when I'm thinking about something especially if it's action oriented, and none of that gets in the way. When I have that clearness, that resonance, that's when I know that this is right. Everything aligns. Everything else can come later.
Okay, sure. I was going to ask you, at some point the planning part has to come in.
Mm-hmm.
But the way you're saying it sounds like there's a difference between planning mind taking over as resistance versus planning mind taking over at the right time to get things done.
Right. This planning mind can come in and stop anything from happening.
Sure. Yeah.
I can certainly. So if something isn't right, if I'm starting to pursue a path or a thought or something that isn't in alignment, isn't necessarily, I don't know, I don't want to use the word right, but it's not aligning for me, then I do find that the planning mind can set up enough barriers that I don't end up moving in that direction.
Sure.
In just, thinking about how we, like this process of discernment, right? When we have something in front of us and we're not clear, but it might be something that's really helpful to us. Is that, like, what would be your process today around, like, if you don't feel clear completely, like you were describing, but you're trying to get those other things out of the way?
Yeah, that's probably the more common process.
Yeah.
For me. That's the more common experience. The ahas only happen that happens sometimes, but that is not the
daily.
That is not the daily.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is the daily. The process, for me, I think I've learned my process now is to slow down.
Okay.
I'm more comfortable sitting with it. And I'm more comfortable sitting in an uncomfortable space than I used to be.
Okay.
And that has been, that is practice.
Yeah.
As much as I would love to be a daily meditator, and I aspire to that, still a work in progress. But I do find that sitting with something, feeling the uncomfortable feelings, there's no working around those things. I have to go through them.
Yeah.
That's my practice for discernment. And, certainly I have also tried, I take action sometimes and I can feel if the actions, usually I can feel whether or not the action is right.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of sitting and feeling the feeling that I'm having at that time, whether it's comfortable or not.
When it's uncomfortable, are there certain questions that you might ask yourself to, I don't know, work through the fear of the uncomfortableness?
I usually try to peel back the layers and understand, if we're talking about fear, what it is that I'm actually afraid of. And a lot of the time, I find that peeling that back somehow comes down to, for me, oftentimes it can be ego related.
Sure.
And this, it varies depending on what we're talking about. Certainly fear of abandonment. It seems like when I peel these down, they are very oftentimes old, like kind of childhood things related to safety, security, and my basic need.
Yeah.
And it takes a while, and I don't always get there. But if I sit with it and I am really honest with myself about what it is that I'm feeling and what I am, if we're talking about being afraid of something, and I can get down there, I usually find that it is something related to a basic need: safety, security, love,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
All that.
Yeah. No, I appreciated your saying if I'm really honest with myself.
Yes,
Right.
I'm not always honest with myself.
I think it's true for all of us.
And I think I'm more honest with myself now than I used to be. I have more tools. I have more ability to look at things about myself that aren't necessarily what I want them to be. Because one of the things that I've learned, inner knowing, is that I have to look at myself. I have to be as honest as I can about who I am and what I'm afraid of and what I want, like who and what might need to change. And I know that there are things about myself I don't know, that I don't see, that other people see. And I'm right now gathering up the courage to ask 3 people in my life to work through that or to give me that assessment. I'm not quite there yet. I'm a little nervous about that.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that doesn't want to know, but I need to know because that's all part of this
Work.
inner knowing work.
Yeah.
Work through that assessment. What do you mean?
So Teresa and I have talked about this. It would be asking 3 people in my life to share with me some things that I may not see or know about myself that they believe would be important or useful for me to know.
Yeah. And typically, like guidance that I would give in a situation like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just 3 random people.
Nope.
Right. But really the thoughtful intention of who those people are,
Yes.
right? Are they going to tell me their true experience of me? Or are they just going to say, oh, you're fine. It's fine. Everything's right. Which is not helpful, not what we're looking for.
So I'm really thinking about who those 3 people are.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's a big exercise in vulnerability, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think that also part of this work is allowing myself to be vulnerable, not just with others, but also with myself.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of years very armored up, and I needed to be, I guess. I don't know, but that's just not how I want to walk in the world anymore.
What's your experience with opening yourself to vulnerability?
Well, it's scary.
Yeah. How's it gone for you when you did, though?
I would say that overall it's been rewarding. It has changed some relationships in my life, and some of those relationships are no longer, I let some relationships go that needed to, because I think in some cases, here's where I stand with it. If I'm in a relationship with somebody and I really truly feel that I cannot be vulnerable with them, then that is probably not a relationship that I'm going to continue.
When you're making that assessment, what's going on in your body or brain when you're evaluating?
Ooh.
Is it
Well,
safe
just
to be
talking
vulnerable?
about it,
Yeah.
my heart rate increased. My
Sure.
throat's a little dry. I tend to feel that I feel a lot of things in my chest. I've also broken out in a full body sweat. I mean, I've had some physical reactions to some of those situations. I have had, in the last couple of years, I have had a couple of conversations with people where I told them that we were not going to continue to be in each other's lives. And it was hard when I did physically feel that in my body. Yeah, I could feel it right now, even just thinking about it.
Well, take a breath. It's safe here.
Yeah, it is safe.
It
here.
is.
Yeah. But it was relief ultimately. And there was grief involved with some of those relationships. It wasn't because I stopped caring about the people. I just knew that we weren't going to be able to go any further.
Sure.
It wasn't safe. I have to be vulnerable, be able to be vulnerable. I have to be able to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't want to be performative.
That's a big word.
It is.
It is. I think as I've gotten into middle age, I realized that the time that we have in this go around really isn't very long. And I want to invest my time and energy in people in relationships that also want to invest their time and energy in me. They have to be reciprocal. They have to be safe. They have to be honest, and we need to be vulnerable, be able to be vulnerable with each other. And if those components aren't there, then I'm going to invest my limited and finite time and energy, the most important resources and attention that I have, in relationships that ultimately feel good.
Takes a lot of courage.
It does. And I think we've talked about this before, and I was holding on to some relationships because I'd been in them for such a long period of time. And I really had to reconcile that just because I'd been in a friendship for 20 years didn't mean that I had to continue that friendship if it wasn't meeting those components that I was talking about. And that the amount of time ultimately isn't that important. The history, that's just time. But I can't spend my time looking backward and quantifying the strength of a friendship based on how long we've had it. That's not really where the value is.
Sure. I mean, it feels like living with integrity.
Yeah.
In lots of different ways. Do you see the vulnerability piece, that willingness or desire to be able to tell your truth, crossing over, beyond just personal relationships into just your general interaction with other people?
Mm-hmm. In my professional life, for sure. Yeah.
Professional life precludes us from just walking away, saying thank you. But we're not going to associate anymore, and I know that's simplistic, but in professional life, you can't necessarily do that.
No.
And so how do you reconcile?
Well, that is a tough one. So that requires more nuance. I suppose I can still decide how much I'm going to invest to a certain extent, even in the professional world. I'm trying to work through that in my mind and see if I have a good example of that for you.
It's a tough question.
It is a tough one. Because we see that there's still relationship. My job is primarily about relationship.
Right.
And in my administrative role, I do still have to offer support to faculty where I work. I do still get to choose to what extent or how much of myself I have to give. And there is a performative piece in that role. I think for me, I just have to, I just show up with integrity. That's all I can do.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's not often that I'm asked to do something or to interact with somebody in a way that is uncomfortable for me, but it has happened. And in the past, I have maybe done some things that I didn't really want to do or feel good about. Not anything that hurt anybody else, but, I am just not willing to do that anymore. And I think the other piece of this is what we're talking about, your question, Walker, is that I've become more willing to have difficult conversations at work.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
We actually had we have a management series of courses, and one of the courses was having difficult conversations at work. And so
Great course. Hopefully.
It was really
topic.
helpful. And it really broke down the steps to having a difficult conversation. And it was really timely for me because something had happened. I'd been left out of a decision that impacted my entire team, and I was pretty upset about it, but I hadn't said anything. I'd been sitting on it for a couple of months because it was going to be a tough conversation to have with two other people that I work with daily. I took the course, and
universe handed you a lifeline there.
And it had really been eating at me for a couple of months.
We carry that pain when we can't do it.
And it was affecting my ability to interact with these other two people. Every time I walked into a room, I was guarded. I was kind of pissy. I couldn't really even hear them anymore because it was bothering me so much. And I knew that this was just not going to go away. My feelings, they were oblivious. Anyway, so I sat down, I had to have the difficult conversation. And ultimately I felt better. I can't necessarily say that it solved the problem, but I know that their expectation of how I'm going to work with them going forward is a lot more clear and honest than it was before.
Sure.
So now their experience of me is a lot more real.
Yes.
And it was vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I've done that once, I feel like I could do that again if I need to.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully I won't. But, it's that willingness to have the difficult conversations. And, you do it professionally. You're in the professional world.
Right.
But, I think that was a big piece for me.
Yeah, it is. I heard a speaker say vulnerability is like the first and foremost way to create relation, but it can also, I guess when I go forward that way and expose myself with vulnerability, there's a fear of being seen as weak or having it turned against me, people to, take advantage. And so there's some balancing process in there for me. But babe, what do you think about, vulnerability in any setting? How do we balance out that risk that we will be perceived as weak or less than, or somebody we take advantage of when we've been honest and vulnerable and direct?
Sure. What comes to mind first is that we don't have control over anybody else's story. And for some people, it will be seen as weak. For some people, it will be seen as challenging. For some people, it will be seen as rude. I think that piece is so, difficult. And so for me, what I think about, and, I guess it's not any different for me in this arena, but, I want you to have a voice. I want you to have integrity. I want you to have the least amount of regret as possible. That's what I want. And so I don't know that the setting, whether it's, closer relationships or work relationships, some people are going to see the work we're doing on the podcast as weak. It's true.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah. And we can't control those perceptions. What I believe is that vulnerability is something not modeled well for us. And the reality is if we could all be more honest about what we're experiencing and be able to hold it, right, without needing to defend ourselves or take it personally, just try to assess it, because not all the feedback we're going to get from people is real, right? Some of it, about us, some of it is projection.
Mm-hmm.
But to consider it, can we take it and consider the feedback and grow from it in whatever way that is? Maybe having a more clear voice, because this is really hard. It's messy, this process of learning to be vulnerable. When we change, we tend to swing the pendulum all the other way, right? So
oversharing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I've had a vulnerability hangover.
Right.
Nice.
I had it for a while. It's getting better, but yeah.
That would be the name of this episode, Vulnerability Hangover.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
When you wake up the next day, you're like, oh, was that too much?
Right.
But it's out there. So yeah, we're going to
that's
work through
awesome.
it.
What you said about carrying it though, and you finally get to the point where you're able to be, have integrity to yourself,
Right.
honest and direct, and just let it go. And, if you want to talk about inner knowing, those are moments to me of,
the feeling.
now I feel it in my body. Just even talking about it, I can feel
lightness.
release. It's like, thank you. Why didn't I do that earlier?
Absolutely. That's part I want to walk around in the world and I want to feel as buoyant as I can. And that's a work in progress.
Yes.
I don't think that's ever going to stop. I think we've talked about this, Teresa. I hit a point sometime within the past year when I was like, I am so fucking sick of working on myself. Like, I am tired of this. When does this end? This is hard.
I hear you.
And I kind of had regroup, because I got tired of it for a little bit. And we talked about, when does it end? And
never.
It doesn't.
But I do think we need
easier.
breaks. Yeah. And I do. I think the more we practice it, it does get easier. But sometimes we do need a break. We just are like, okay, can I just go through a period of time here where I can just be?
Can this just be easy for a little bit?
Yeah. Well, yeah. The universe is a fascinating place. But, but I think about when you guys were talking, I was thinking about how do we balance our responsibility just for others, right, in this? And that's where I think for me the least amount of regret as possible piece comes in. Because I think we often don't say anything because we don't want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah.
We're afraid of their reaction.
Yeah.
I'm going to feel shame or guilt or whatever.
Or be abandoned.
Or be abandoned, right.
That's the big one for me.
Yeah. And so how do we balance that? And a practice for sure, asking people, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, we can again get thoughtful, intentional, honest feedback from about how we interact with others so that we can keep learning and refining those skills. Because often, we just need to do it. It's so uncomfortable. We just need to push through it, and we just kind of vomit it all out there. And then it's not well thought out, or
but it's out.
But it's out, right? But where does the integrity and the regret piece come in, right? So, because to me, it's not just about having a voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have a voice, have integrity to ourselves, least amount of regret as possible. And it doesn't mean we do it well all the time. Again, it's messy, but I feel like, practicing is the only way we get better. We can rehearse it in our mind 6 million times, and that will not make us good at it. The only way we can get good at it is by doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was sitting here thinking you were talking about regret. And for me, I think I can't think of a lot of, and I'm sure I'm missing things, but I can't think of a lot of things that I've said or conversations that I've had that I regret. But right now in this chair, I can think about I can wrap my arms around a few conversations that I think I need to have. And if I don't have them, that's where I could end up with regret.
Right. Right. My experience of you is that you are intentional and thoughtful.
Sometimes I try.
Yeah, you do try. You do try.
I do.
Yeah.
I don't always hit the mark.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah, none of us do. But
No.
yeah, I just know right now I can think of a couple of people that I need to have a conversation with.
Yeah.
I want to have deep and meaningful relationships.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just less willing to skim the surface now with people that I really care about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And those hard conversations aren't always the end of something, even if we're afraid that they are.
Right.
Sometimes they really are exactly what needed to happen in order for the relationship to continue in any way that's beneficial for both people.
Yeah, and I want to be a safe person for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I want to create that psychological safety so that we can have real, meaningful relationships and conversations.
Yeah.
And look, my whole life isn't a deep, meaningful conversation. There's a lot of just, laughter and fun too. But I just don't see any way that you could move through life without having that in your relationships.
Oh, you can. I did it for a long, long time, like decades.
Yeah.
But here's what I know now. When I'm able to tell my true, to my partner and to other people too, even if it's messy and I don't do it well, etc., and it doesn't go well, it still brings us closer. And it's learning to trust that the other person is not going to abandon. This is my experience just based on, how I grew up, et cetera, is not going to abandon me, even if what I've said is upsetting or hurtful, even those things. But it does make us closer.
Yeah, absolutely. And safe, a mutual choice, right, towards this healthier relationship. Because if we're trying to have those conversations with someone who isn't interested, obviously, that is not the case.
Well, and even if they are interested and have done a lot of work, the response can still, you can still trigger something in them, their inner child comes out, or inner teenager.
Yeah.
And that's typically if Teresa and I are having a rough spot where we go. So it's two 15-year-olds having a conversation for a bit. But what I know is rather than carry, because it's poison to carry it. So
it is poison. I learned that a year ago. As you're both aware, I had open heart surgery. And I'm fairly young to have that happen. And I think that I had carried a lot of grief for a long time. Yeah. And it was a literal and figurative broken heart moment that I had to go through. And then the surgery it opened me up again, literally and figuratively. There was an opening up, and things have been really different for me over the past year since that happened. The drive to embrace this vulnerability piece and have the honest conversation has been so much stronger. I think that I understand now more than ever. We are here for this limited amount of time. Yeah. And I also needed to get that grief out. I'd held on to it for so long.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was aware of the impact that it was having.
Tell us more about the grief starting to release associated with open heart surgery.
After I had the surgery, I felt so sad. And of course, I was recovering from surgery, so I wasn't feeling physically that good.
Sure.
But there was this, I just realized how much sadness I had been carrying. And it was deep. And I don't think all of it was even mine. Some of it was, but I think that some of it I had inherited. I think there's probably some intergenerational grief that I was carrying around too. I had to work through in those weeks after I was recovering. I had to just work through this feeling of sadness. It was heavy and it was a process. It was like shedding it. But I kept thinking of myself being opened up and that I knew that something had come out of me. And I just knew that once I got through this bit of the recovery process, I knew I was going to feel lighter. And I did. Mm-hmm. And then, then I was also aware of the grief and the sadness. So I looked at that. I had to spend some time thinking about that, allowing myself to feel it. I think that when I was 11, my grandmother died and she had been my primary caregiver. And as an 11-year-old, I couldn't really grieve her. And there wasn't any, the adults around me we just didn't talk about it. Right. They weren't able to help me with that. And I think I really stuffed that for a long time. And so it kind of felt like I was finally releasing some of that. And it's like,
wow,
I held that for years and years.
I can feel the emotion just having the conversation. I mean, I've got like tears coming up, but it's like, it's also a thing of beauty too. But, just crazy that it takes something like that for that to move.
I journaled about it. I think it was, so after I had surgery, I couldn't sleep for a while from the anesthesia. I think the side effects, I was awake a lot. And, at least for me, when I'm awake in the middle of the night, things can get something about nighttime.
Dark of the night.
Things can get pretty real and pretty raw when you're in there by yourself. And I was doing some journaling. And one of the things that I journaled about was what we were talking about, the literal figurative opening up and the broken heart and all of that. And one of the things I journaled about was that I didn't regret that this had happened, the surgery, that I felt like it had happened for this reason, because I needed to be, quote unquote, like cracked open.
Sure.
And I wasn't going to get there myself as fast. And that it had actually, my mitral valve giving out was actually a gift. And I really was not seeing it that way before the surgery. Yeah. I was just blown away. And then after we were done, I was recovering and I'm awake in the middle of the night. I could look at it and I thought, oh, this was actually a gift.
So you think that happened while you were doing the journaling, that it came to you, the realization?
Yeah. And I realized that this whole situation, this whole scenario, this health crisis was actually a gift to me.
Yeah. And not just, was there a period of time where you just didn't understand the feelings that you were having? Because I would have interpreted this as well as just, I was afraid I was going to die. So it's post-surgery depression or those sorts of things versus, hey, there's a bigger picture here. When was the moment or what was the tool you were using that helped you realize that?
It was the journaling.
Yeah.
I made notes in my phone when I was up at night. And then, honestly, I went 5 nights without sleeping. Wow. I was awake for 5 nights and I was pretty miserable. Yeah. All I wanted to do was sleep.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. But I don't remember if it's the 4th or 5th night that I actually got pen and paper. So I stopped making the notes on my phone. There's something about writing.
Yes.
And I started doing some journaling and that's when it came to me. It's like, oh, this whole thing was a gift.
Yeah. We're always, wanting in our conversations to have people share, whatever tools that they've found that, help get to those points of clarity, right?
It was journaling for me.
Journaling is a big one. If you're able to do it, I personally know to do it, but I'm resistant.
Me too.
Yeah.
But, at that, like all resistance was stripped from me.
Yeah.
After that, I was pretty raw. And so, but I don't know if I would have, gotten to that place, everything was aligned.
Mm-hmm.
It was just meant to be. But I really was not seeing that situation as a gift before.
Yeah.
And then I got it. And it was, yeah. Yeah. And then I did eventually sleep again. But that's...
I'm glad.
It took a while. Yeah, that was the gift. And I think, that's an inner knowing.
Oh, yeah.
As well. I mean, I felt that in every fiber of my being. And there was no resistance to the idea or to the awareness.
That is a gift.
Mm-hmm. I knew that was right. Mm-hmm. But, that is also when we talk about where we feel something in our bodies, there's no mistaking that there's a mind-body connection. And it can work for us or not.
Yes.
Now tell me more.
Well, look, I really think that the metaphysical connection, I don't have any history of heart disease personally. I was a healthy person. I hadn't had any major cardiac issues before this. And not that I live a totally heart healthy lifestyle either. I mean, I love cheeseburgers and I probably don't move around enough. But anyway, but there wasn't any indication that I was headed toward having that type of a health crisis.
Right.
I truly believe that a big component of that was the metaphysical. It was what I was carrying.
Mm-hmm.
And that was manifested. Sometimes the universe just really has to shake you up to get your attention.
Yes, it does.
And I feel like that was really direct.
Yeah. Yeah, I've described it to Teresa as, it's just like a gentle, greeting, and then it's, a light knocking, and then until it generate, ultimately it's pounding on the door.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what happened. I don't know if I would have identified that grief and sadness, how much of it I was carrying.
Sure.
Maybe eventually, but I wasn't getting there very quickly on my own. I was thinking about a lot of other things, but I think that was a really, really big one that needed to be released. And right, so we got to the pounding on the door.
Yeah.
I ignored the knocks.
Yeah. As we do. Until we
But then,
keep practicing.
Tie it all into like the abandonment thing for me. And of course, ultimately, the thing that I feared the most happened, right? And then on and on and on. And identifying those pieces, it helps me with this work.
Right.
Is that, I think it, through the work that I've done and with all of my teachers, but learning how to identify what those real base and core fears of mine are, then it can help me understand where I'm getting caught up in the whole, being honest with myself, being vulnerable. If I can tie it back and understand what the underlying fear is, or concern, or what's keeping me from getting to where I want to be, that has just been so helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about fear, but there's also a lot of ego pieces for me too. I want to be seen in a certain way.
Yeah. Tell us more about that.
Well, of course I want to be seen as smart and kind and caring. There are all these values that I want to be seen as having, virtue. Was it virtue signaling?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So, and I don't want I don't necessarily want to parade out some of my maybe not so fine characteristics that I'm working on. I can be, selfish and snarky and all those other things too. I'm human. But so those pieces factor into the ego piece.
Mm-hmm. When you think, Angie, you had mentioned just a moment ago about all your teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Are there certain, I don't know, in the last few years, things that you really feel like have helped bring you, more awareness, more knowledge, more clarity about your own growth? Are there certain books that you feel like have stood out? Like, what comes to mind when you think about the tools?
What started this for me years ago was the work of Abraham Hicks, so Esther Hicks. I think that was a starting point for me. Using she has a couple of, or they have a couple of simple guided meditations. I think there are 4.
Yeah, getting into the vortex.
Yeah, getting into the vortex.
Love them.
Yeah,
yes.
So I think there's one for relationship, financial,
physical, and general well-being.
Yeah. So those 4 were a good. That was my starting place. I could connect with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I am fortunate to have a wife who is she is the spiritual leader of our family. So she's always at least 10 steps ahead of me in this regard. So I just kind of, take her lead, I guess. But she introduced, and she has resources galore for us. So I could just kind of pick and choose. But Abraham Hicks was a good starting point for me. I could connect with that one. And I'm in the research world, and I'm not totally evidence-based or anything like that, but I do really I like the work of Brene Brown. Mm-hmm. She does a lot of vulnerability research. I really enjoy her work. She has a great podcast. I listen to that. There's another researcher by the name of Amy Cuddy, Cuddy, and she does work on power poses.
Yes.
Oh, we're going to talk about that before we're done.
Yeah.
So those are a couple that I like. Esther Hicks is definitely not on the evidence-based side. That's woo-woo, but that just really resonates with me.
Yeah.
So those are 3 that I like. And I really enjoy podcasts, so I kind of bounce around and listen to different people out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Esther Hicks is who really got me started.
Yeah.
I feel like that's so accessible.
It is. And I love it because it's 15 minutes. And, I came upon it, I don't know, after I almost died. And it was part of my tool that I used to help me fall asleep at night because I could not sleep at night, terrified to go to sleep. Mm-hmm. And it's what I use now. That's why it's bringing tears up. Like last night, I was like, turn on the damn getting into the vortex. But then I got to get out of bed and get my phone that's across the room. Because I don't know, I probably laid there for 2 hours last night.
You needed to get on your high flying disc.
I did. I did. And it's the bilateral stimulation piece of it, and ever since my surgery a few years ago, I can't bring it up in my own mind anymore. I used to be able to lay there, and if I was struggling, I could bring it up. And I, for whatever reason, literally can't. And so I have to turn it on in order for it to be helpful. But it's been such a great tool, and I love it because it's so just thoughtful, right? Like it's just, I don't know, some level of inquiry that's a part of it that just feels, nice and safe, and it's gentle, and
all of that. I like Tara Brach's meditations too. So those are some. I'm not to the point in my life where I have to have a guided meditation.
Okay.
If I sit down and try to just sit in quiet, that generally doesn't work for me.
Yeah,
my mind starts planning or I fall asleep. So for me, those simple, gentle, guided meditations are really helpful.
Yeah. Well, Walker's writing 4 of them or 5 of them right now, aren't you?
Yeah. Just brief.
Yeah. Excited to read them when he's done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just need a little bit of, I don't know, support, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. This has been on my mind since yesterday, but I had my therapy session yesterday, and man, there was so much. And like that had happened in a week and a half. I was like, whew, I'm exhausted. And he doesn't, like normally like touch me at all, afterwards. But as I'm walking out the door, like he like touched like right on the tip of my shoulder, and my whole body went, whew, and I just was like, that being like held like emotionally, peace, and how our body can just, even in the sharing, right? Like we can just constrict because it's like so much. And sometimes, the recordings for me are just like someone doing that kind of gentle touch, like, oh, you have permission to release that because you're obviously having a hard time doing that on your own. So that's what it's like, for me. So.
Yeah. It's nice when somebody can hold that space, right?
Well, and give us permission. I mean, it's amazing how much permission we need to take care of ourselves.
Oh my goodness. And it's a privilege to be able to do this work too.
Yeah. Yes.
I've really thought about that a lot.
Yes, it is. So many people don't have the time, space, energy, knowledge, resources.
All of that.
Where
they're worried about meeting their basic needs.
Right.
And I've really had a lot of gratitude and recognizing how much of a privilege it is for me to be able to do the work that I'm doing, we do together.
Yeah. Oh, that group work, man. Whew, it's powerful.
Speaking of group work, can we talk about your power pose?
Oh,
sure.
It's, do you mind if I share a little bit of my experience?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it's a beautiful thing, and I've never admired somebody else's power pose before. I don't know that I ever asked anybody to show me, but, you were on retreat with us, and somehow that came up, and I asked you. You didn't hesitate. You just stood up.
I actually forgot about this, Walker.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're reminding me.
Well, and you, it's like, it was when I think of you in that scene.
Yes.
And when you were going through your surgery, I texted and just said, I'm imagining you in your power pose, and remember that. And because it was just beautiful, and if you want to talk about vulnerability and all those things, just being willing to really show us this group of people, and how you like, it was intentional, and you settled into it. And, I could tell you were grounding, whether, that was going through your mind or not, but you did. And then it was completely unexpected what you did, and it was just, it was a testament to the human spirit.
Oh, wow.
Really.
Okay. Wow.
And it's a really, was powerful for me. So thank you for sharing. But, hopefully, and I'm interested in what your experience is when you think about that yourself.
So when I power pose at work, I have a private hallway that I go to where nobody can see me. The power pose, I use it when I'm heading into a situation where I need to be grounded. I spend a lot of time in my professional life in conversation with people that are higher status than I am in the workplace. Sometimes it's challenging. So when I'm heading into something like that, that's when I power pose. And it's intentional, it's grounding, and I hold it for 2 minutes. So I set a timer on my phone, and I go somewhere where I can have natural light. So it is intentional, and it is. I use it to make sure that I'm grounded and that I'm going in to a situation that is anxiety producing or stressful, and sometimes if I'm asking for something, so that I can go in there and be as grounded as I can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As it is 2 feet firmly on the ground when you're doing the power pose.
Yeah.
And so you learned the technique through
Amy
Cuddy.
She did a TED Talk. I think I saw it maybe 10 years ago. And then she's done a lot of research too, but the TED Talk is where I was first introduced to the power pose.
We'll have to look her up.
Yeah, so I've used that ever since.
Yeah.
But I usually don't show people the power pose. I forgot that I did that.
I'm privileged to have seen it, and that you did it without reservation.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, talk about
you guys
power
really
through
had me
vulnerability.
in the right space.
Yeah. I actually
At
think
retreat.
I think I have a photograph of it, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Because I
want to see it.
Weren't we doing the firewalk prep stuff when that wasn't that?
I don't think so. We were in a group in a circle in the front room.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe other people were then doing power poses outside while we were doing the fire.
I would guess that it inspired some power posing.
Well, right before the firewalk would be a great time to power pose.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I thought like Jenny did it and then Jill did it. I think. So I think they must have. I think you inspired people to do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the power of vulnerability.
That is the power of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Vulnerability can be inspiring.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And empowering too.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing about that. And I'm glad you raised it, because I figured I would get around to it sometime, because it was really, it's significant to me when I think of you. Mm-hmm. So I just appreciate you being willing to share with us.
Thank you. Have you used the power pose, Walker?
I haven't.
Before
I
trial?
didn't know it was a technique, but I'm going to be looking up Ms. Cuddy's book. Or TED Talk. Yeah. No, mm-hmm. I think it would be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Finding the things that speak to us to help us step into those uncomfortable spaces. Help get our body ready, energetically grounded.
Tapping into our inner knowing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
Yay.
Oh, Angie, thank you so much for
my pleasure
doing this.
Thank you.
Sharing with us. Yeah. It's just all of our stories. We just don't ever know what's going to touch someone. And it was lovely for me to see you today recognize how your vulnerability touched Walker, but also inspired other people. Mm-hmm. It's really lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you are doing this podcast. This is putting something really lovely and useful out into the world. You're being vulnerable every week.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of humanness in this podcast.
Thank you. Well, we will keep stepping in.
We got plenty of that.
Yeah, we do. Oh my goodness, it's a big list. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to explore life with you. We encourage curiosity, self-growth, and we strive to be more compassionate every day.